Hi, and welcome back to the shop. I'm John Peters, and these bedside tables are the newest addition to my furniture collection. If you'd like to build these tables or any of my woodworking projects, I'll have a link to the plans right here and down in the description below. These tables are veneered with Hawaiian monkey pod, and I was happy to partner with GL Veneer on this project. If you'd like to learn more about this veneer or any of their veneers, check out glveneered.com, and I'll have a link to their website down in the description. Now let's go ahead and get to work. I'm building the tables with 3/4 inch birch plywood, and I'll get started by ripping the parts to width. I'm going to make these rips a little bit heavy, then I'll rip them to their exact measurements once the pieces are a little bit smaller and easier to handle through the table saw. Now I can use the crosscut sled to crosscut the parts to length. I built this extra large crosscut sled maybe 5 or 6 years ago. It's really handy. I use it on just about every project, and if you'd like to build it, I'll have a link to the project video down in the description below. With all the parts for the inner box cut to size, I'll assemble the box using a little wood glue and 1 3/4 18 gauge nails in the nail gun. I'll make the outer box by simply attaching 3/4 inch plywood to the inner box. I'm working on the sides first. I'll make sure that I'm flush at the bottom, flush at the front, and then trace a line. And when I make this cut, I'd rather this cut be a little heavy than a little light. If it's a little heavy, I can always clean it up with a flush cut bit in the router. If it's a little light, there's not much you can do about it. So either really take your time and creep up on the cut, or just make it a little heavy and clean it up with the router. On second thought, take your time and creep up on the cut so you have a perfect fit on both the bottom and top, because you won't be able to trim a heavy cut with a flush cut bit in the router, because the ball bearing won't be supported at the back of the cabinet because the inner box is smaller than the outer box. So I just didn't think of that. So yeah, just take your time and creep up on the cut. In case you're wondering why the inner box is smaller than the outer box, that's to allow for a 1/2 inch plywood back once the cabinet is finished. After nailing the outer sides to the inner box, I'll add squeeze clamps in the center to get a good glue bond and laminate the parts together. After I attached the sides to the inner box, making sure that the fronts were nice and flush, I gave the top and bottom a quick sanding with the orbital sander. You just want to make sure that everything is nice and smooth so you get a good bond when you glue the top and bottom in position. I did cut the tops and bottoms just a little bit heavy because now I've got support at the back of the cabinet for the ball bearing in the router bit. So now I can use the flush cut bit in the router to trim the parts flush. Now that I have the boxes made, The next step is to make trim that will cover the edge of the plywood at the front and back of the cabinet. Usually, I would make the solid wood edge band molding from the same wood species as the veneer, but since I don't have any Hawaiian monkey pod boards in the shop, I'm going to laminate the monkey pod veneer to 1/2-inch pieces of mahogany. I decided to apply the veneer to the molding so the edge banding will have cross grain as opposed to long grain, and I think this will have a nice design effect around the opening of the cabinet. With the veneer attached to the 1/2-inch mahogany, I'll trim the edge on one side and then rip the molding at 1.5 inches. When I made this molding, I made it just a little bit heavy. And when I attach it, I want to make sure that I'm flush on the inside and a little bit of an overhang is on the outside. I can sand that flush later. And I'm using a piece of scrap wood with a miter cut on it to make sure that I'm lined up right where I want to be. And then I'll make my mark over here on the other side for the next cut. For the edge banding on the back of the cabinet, I simply ripped solid mahogany at 1/4 by 3/4 of an inch and repeated the process of picture framing the back of the cabinet to cover the plywood edge. Now that I have the edge banding attached to both the front and back of the cabinets, the next step is to build the base for the bottom. To make the base of the cabinets, I'll get started by ripping pieces of 3/4 inch plywood at 2 inches. Next, over at the miter saw, I'll cut the parts to length. To build the base of the cabinets, I'll use simple butt joints reinforced with wood glue and 1 3/4 18 gauge nails. After building each base, I decided to add a little more strength to them by adding a brace in each corner. After building the base, I pre-drilled and countersunk holes in the center of each side, so I'll be able to attach the base to the bottom of the cabinet with screws. The veneer will be shipped to you rolled up in a box, and these corn toss bean bags are really handy to have around. They're going to weight the veneer down and at the same time not scratch the surface. After making the long cut on the veneer, the next step is to cross cut the veneer to length. And I want the veneer to waterfall around the cabinet. So I've marked it out A, B, and C with an arrow pointing towards the front. That'll help keep me from getting confused. This will be the right side of the cabinet, this will be the top of the cabinet, and this will be the left side. When I apply the veneer, I'll use sticks to help position the veneer. You can also use dowels. Once the veneer is in position, I'll remove the sticks and apply pressure working from one side to the other. I wanted to mention that when I apply veneer, I like to use 2 coats of contact cement, allowing the first coat to dry to touch, then applying the second coat. Once the second coat is dry to touch, then you can apply the veneer to the substrate. I have a step-by-step video on my channel on how to work with veneer using contact cement, and I'll have a link to it on the right-hand side of the screen and down in the description below if you'd like to check it out. After applying the veneer to both sides of the cabinet, I'll apply the veneer to the tops of the cabinets and the cabinet bases, a little sanding, and now the cabinets are ready for finish. Okay, well, here they are, and I have to say I'm really happy with the way they turned out. I really like this Hawaiian monkey pod. First time ever using it. I've never even saw it before this project, but I really do like it. It did require a little more work because of the veneer on the edge banding at the front, but I do think that that adds to the design. So a little more work, but I do think it was worth it. After finishing the cabinets, I did spray the inside. I had to tape out the front edge. That was a little tricky. I used the yellow frog tape. I feel like that gives me the best or the sharpest line. So taped that out, sprayed the inside of the cabinets with Benjamin Moore's Command, and this is the Dove White color. I also added the base. The base is simply screwed to the bottom of the cabinet with 2.5-inch screws. And then for the backs of the cabinet, I used just half-inch plywood. I think this is Baltic birch plywood, but just half-inch plywood. I like half-inch plywood for the backs. It just makes the cabinets feel a little more robust. A little information on the finish. I finished these with the first 2 coats de-waxed shellac. Now, when you're working with veneer, you have to think about the finish a little bit more than, say, solid wood, because waterborne finishes can expand the veneer and create bubbles in the veneer. So there's a workaround for that. I'm going to get into that right now. The first step was to put on 2 coats of the de-waxed shellac. That seals the wood, and it also brings out the beauty of the wood. Nothing will destroy the beauty of natural wood like a waterborne finish. So if I'm using what I consider a beautiful wood like this Hawaiian monkey pod, sapele, walnut, white oak, whatever, I'm never going to put the first coats with a waterborne finish because that's just going to dull the finish. The workaround is put on 1 or 2 coats of the de-waxed shellac, and that'll pop the grain and seal the wood. So for the veneer, the 2 coats of shellac give you that beautiful look of the grain, but it also seals the wood a little bit and takes away some of the danger of using a waterborne finish. So now when I applied the waterborne, I ended up using Total Boat Halcyon because it's a pretty rugged finish. I went over the shellac with the Halcyon using thin coats. So the moisture is not just sitting on that veneer, potentially seeping into the wood fibers, potentially causing a roll or something where the veneer could delaminate or bubble up. So that's something you really want to think about. Thin coats, seal the wood first. I like to use the Halcyon or other waterborne lacquers because they happen to be very rugged and more impervious to water stains than shellac, wipe-on varnishes, and even lacquer. So something to consider when you're finishing your veneer furniture. So I hope you enjoyed this project. I hope that you'll build it. I'll have a link to the plans right here. If you do build it, I hope that you'll share it on Instagram so I can see it. I think these look great in Hawaiian monkey pod, but I'd like to see them in any other wood species. Would be fun to see them in. I'm sure they would look good. And if you've made it this far, you might want to see where these will end up for their final home. I built these for my oldest son, Jack. He lives in an apartment a few miles from here. I've made him a few things, so I'm going to go bring these over there right now and maybe show you a few other things that I made them. So stick around if you want to see that. All right, I'm here in my son Jack's room from his apartment, just so you can see what Jack looks like. Here he is. He was a little guy when I made the painting over his bed. I'll show you the end tables in a second, but I think Jack was in second grade. You were in second grade when I did this. This was what does your dad do for work? And I went to his class and I had the target, and then I made those gray marks, kind of like a Franz Klein expressionist type painting. And so here it is, all these years later, he still has the painting. Here are the end tables, and I'm really happy with the way these turned out. It was fun making these. Nice to have another piece of furniture added to the collection. That's the idea, is to build a collection of furniture so people can build their furniture for their home. Here are, these are coasters that I've made. They're sort of like abstract paintings. Other things that I made in Jack's room is the headboard. Originally I made this for our bedroom up in Vermont, but it's here now. Here's an early project from YouTube, the guitar hanger. And this is a painting that I made. This is Jack skateboarding. I think you were maybe in 11th or 10th grade at the time. Yeah. And so this is kind of got a cool surface on it. And one more piece. This, I forgot about this one. Simple little table. So, yeah, it's amazing. You make things and years go by and your kid turns into a young man, and now I'm making furniture for my sons. I'm sure that Walter and Michael are starting to get a little annoyed because Walter said that you've got the lion's share right now. So
they gotta move out.
Yeah, they do. They got to move out. Once they move out, I'll start making them things. So I hope you guys enjoyed this project, and that's it for now. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next time. One more project I forgot, the painted bookcase. This has been a really popular project, both in views and plan sales. So if you're looking for a project to build, this one's a fun one. Pretty much a beginner project because it's just plywood boxes decorated with a little trim and a nice sapele top. So I think that covers everything now. So again, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.